apologies for running behind. My mom called. My grandmother is in the ER. And in being in the ER, she's doing okay. She was experiencing, I guess, she wasn't feeling well. And she wasn't feeling well enough. So she was calling me to give me a heads up. That's why I'm late. There are people who are like, when he says 5 minutes, he's going to be an hour. Sometimes that's true. And I probably shouldn't say 5 minutes. I hope everyone is doing okay today. It's midday. I have an interview today by Slow News Day at 2 p.m. So I want to get a show or two in before that. You know, everybody, how can I start this? Everyone has a lens. Let's start it that way. And what I mean by lens, when I look at the world, particularly from a political standpoint, if somebody is on my wavelength, I tend to give them the benefit of the doubt. Meaning they're entered into the house before I completely disavow what they're saying. They get closer. I give them leeway. I give them a little bit of, like I said, benefit of the doubt in the things that they're saying. For somebody who's not, of course, they barely get through the door. Sometimes they get through the door, but it's somewhat of a gauntlet that they have to walk in order to get to where that person who's on my wavelength gets to almost instantly. It's almost like a trap door at the welcome mat, just falls out. I guess my point is, it works both ways. In things that somebody is on my wavelength, I allow them in. On things that are not in my wavelength, they tend to be excluded or a harder path in order to get to a certain level of believability. I say that to say this. I am not a Democrat or Republican. I'm neither. And because I am neither, when I look at the political landscape, I think I come to different conclusions than some of the conclusions that Democrats have completely excluded from their gaze, let's say political gaze. Because in their standpoint, oh, that would never happen. There's no way that could happen. There's no way that could be true. Because from their standpoint, that guy that's on their wavelength would never do such a thing. I don't have that misfortune. So when I look at the Obama administration, and I come to certain conclusions of possibilities, particularly along the lines of the Trump-Russia stuff. I don't believe the Trump-Russia collusion story. I don't believe that at all. That seems to be a story there purely to hide the fact that they either cheated Sanders and to use that as a political hitstone for Donald Trump. The thing is, they've just found that a FISA warrant for the Steele Dossier, that one of the agents, Bruce Orr, told them that this dossier came from Clinton and this dossier was biased. Here's the problem. When they pushed this up for the FISA warrant, this information was lacking, this information was missing, this information had gone. The FISA warrant, or the Steele Dossier, this dodgy dossier, was one of the things that they used, or the main thing that they used in order to come up with the charges on Donald Trump. Now, I look at this, I see it in these terms. A president of the United States, a Democratic president, that hires Loretta Lynch to be his attorney general, who's also a Democrat. Loretta Lynch does this hostage video. It looks like a hostage video where she is flipping out about Donald Trump taking office, which gives you her perspective of Donald Trump, particularly with regards to him being president of the United States. I am to believe, or I am supposed to believe, at least if you're a Democrat, that this person, Loretta Lynch, who was put there by a Democratic president, would not want another Democrat in that office. I mean, after all, she may be getting another job with that Democrat. Also, not just not want another job in that office, her being a Democrat herself, certainly there is an incentive for her to, let's say, push Comey. Now, the reason I say she has an incentive to push Comey is because if Comey comes back and says there's charges, Hillary Clinton goes away. If Comey comes back and said there are no charges, then Hillary Clinton runs a race. Now, it's a bizarre thing in and of itself for a candidate to be in the primaries with a criminal investigation over their heads and, you know, the political space not telling them to get out the race. But Hillary Clinton was inevitable, and because she was inevitable, it's perfectly okay if she has a criminal investigation over her head. My point is this. If Loretta Lynch has every incentive in the world to put pressure on Comey, whether Obama knew or not, she has every incentive in the world to put pressure on Comey. Now, Comey says pressure was being applied to him. even though he only went so far as to say she was trying to get me to talk about the case in the way that Hillary Clinton was talking about it. This is odd in and of itself. The federal government is not connected with the Hillary Clinton campaign. The federal government is a thing unto itself. It's almost like machinery. The FBI, being agents of this machinery, should not be going around talking about the case in the same way that one of the candidates are talking about the case, because that candidate is talking about the case to obfuscate the reality of the fact that it is a criminal case. So understand what I mean. There is evidence that she was putting pressure on Comey. Comey said as much, even though he didn't go but so far. Beyond that point, we're also supposed to believe that the conversation that Bill Clinton had with Loretta Lynch was purely about their grandkids, as opposed to the most obvious conversation in the world of, kill this case. My wife may be put into prison. I don't want my wife perp walked. Kill this case. What are you doing? This case has gone on too long. Something needs to be done. I expect that conversation to take place. I even expect that Bill Clinton is more subdued about it, of like, look, what the hell are you doing? You need to kill this fucking case. My wife is blah, blah, blah. But I don't believe they were talking about their grandkids. Every incentive in the world is for them to not talk about their grandkids, or at the very least to get the message across that, what are you doing? My wife may be held up for charges. Comey comes out and gives this bizarre statement where he essentially accuses Clinton of all of these crimes, and then turns around and says, but no reasonable prosecutor will bring a charge against this. Now, the no reasonable prosecutor thing was put in to kind of put a bar on the door of intellectual inquisitiveness, of saying, well, he's saying it, but he's going further and saying no prosecutor, not any prosecutor that is sane and has any level of good sense, will bring a case on this. Now, other prosecutors have come on and say, yeah, I will bring a case on this. And there was a case brought just the previous year where they actually locked somebody up. And you know for yourself, if this was anybody other than Hillary Clinton, they would have put you under the prison. The motley crew of characters that got Hillary Clinton off, Strzok, McCabe, Comey, ended up, just so happened, being the motley crew of characters that got Donald Trump on, meaning on this Trump and Russia stuff. You find out that these guys go to FISA court. Now, the thing about FISA court, 99.7% of the FISA warrants that are put forth are accepted. Part of this is because there is no defense attorney in a FISA court. You have to believe and trust everything that's being said by the people who are in the court itself. Well, it seems that there's certain information that was left out of the conversation with regards to them presenting this to the FISA court. Part of that information had to do with the fact that the dossier, the origins, were from the Clinton campaign. And not just the origins from the Clinton campaign, meaning Clinton campaign paid for opposition research. That seemed to have been something that was dropped and left out of the conversation. This is an article that came up. Not just that, I mean, it's always odd to me that they go after Trump and Russia, but this weirdness of them getting the dossier from a British, from a Brit is strange to me. But nevertheless, look at this. FISA shocker. Department of Justice warned Steele Dossier was connected to the Clinton and might be biased. Might be. Your political opponent comes up with opposition research, and the FBI takes that opposition research as if it's the word of God and goes out and starts an investigation using this. Well, they're looking into the other person's campaign. Now, in addition to getting Clinton off, they were spying on Trump's campaign. And they were using the Trump and Russia stuff in order to spy on his campaign, almost as a cover to spy on a campaign. I'm sorry, this stinks. Whether if you're a Trump supporter, you may be more, you like this idea. But if you're a Democrat, you have to, I guess you don't have to, but if this was the Republican Party and all of these things were true, which is everything that I said was true, you would say this stinks. The only reason you don't say this stinks is because this is your party and you are on this particular wavelength. Just saying. I'm not saying this is a fact that this took place. I'm just saying the incentives are there for what I'm saying to have potentially taken place. That it makes all the sense in the world for one of the political parties, if it could get away with it, to get their person off, to not let their person go to jail, while simultaneously getting a slow bleed, almost a war of attrition with a Trump and Russia investigation. Just saying, it's Machiavellian, yes, but impossible, no. When the annals of mistakes and abuses in the FBI's Russia investigation are finally written, Bruce Orr almost certainly will be the #1 witness, according to my sources. Then, number 10, Department of Justice official briefed both FBI and Department of Justice officials on the summer of 2016 about Christopher Steele's Russia dossier, explicitly cautioning that the British intelligence operatives' work was opposition research connected to the Hillary Clinton campaign and might be biased. Orr's briefing in July and August 2016 included the Deputy Director of the FBI, top lawyer for then Attorney General Loretta Lynch, you don't say, and Justice official who later would become the top deputy to Special Counsel Robert Mueller. At the time, Orr was Associate Attorney General, yet his warnings about political bias were pointedly omitted weeks later from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrant that the FBI obtained for the federal court granting permission to spy on whether the Trump campaign was colluding with Russia to hijack the 2016 presidential election. Not only was it biased opposition research, the fact that it was opposition research paid for by the Clinton campaign was mysteriously omitted in order to get the warrant. That's amazing. Orr's activities, chronicled in handwritten notes and congressional testimony I gleaned from sources, provided the most damning evidence to date that the FBI and the Department of Justice may have misled federal judges in October of 2016 in their zeal to obtain a warrant targeting Trump advisor Carter Page just weeks before Election Day. They also contradict the key argument that Democrats have made in their formal intelligence conclusions about Russia. Since it was disclosed later that year that the Steele Dossier was a central piece of evidence supporting the FISA warrant, Justice and FBI officials have been vague about exactly when they learned Steele's work was paid for by the law firm representing the Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee. The FBI is essentially using opposition research from the Clinton campaign in order to go after Trump. That's amazing. A redacted version of the FISA application released last year showed the FBI did not mention any connection to the DNC or Clinton. Rather, it referred to Steele as a reliable source in the past criminal investigation who was hired by a person working for a U.S. law firm to conduct research on Trump and Russia. They hid the fact. They hid it. The FBI claimed it was unaware of any derogatory information about Steele, that Steele was never advised as to the motivation behind the research, but that the FBI speculates that those who hired Steele were likely looking for information to discredit the Trump campaign. Yet in testimony last summer to congressional investigators, Orr revealed that the FBI and justice lawyers had no need to speculate. He explicitly warned them in a series of contacts beginning on July 31st, 2016, that Steele expressed bias against Trump and was working on a project connected to the Clinton campaign. Orr had first-hand knowledge about the motive and the client. He had just met Steele on July 30th, 2016, and Orr's wife, Nellie, worked for Fusion GPS, the same firm employing Steele. This smells. The FBI knew it smelled. And they dropped that information in order to spy on the Trump campaign. That's amazing. I don't like Trump, but this stinks. I'm just saying. I certainly told the FBI that Fusion GPS was working with doing opposition research on Donald Trump, or told congressional investigators, adding that he warned the FBI that Steele expressed bias during their conversations. I provided information to the FBI when I thought Christopher Steele was, as I said, desperate that Trump not be elected, he added. So yes, of course, I provided that to the FBI. The guy who they're getting information from is desperate. He's desperate. But I suspect a lot of them were desperate that Trump wouldn't get elected. It's kind of my point. Let's keep going. It's amazing that they omitted that, isn't it? It's amazing that that tidbit, that the guy who they got the information from was completely desperate that Trump not get elected. Now, I understand you're being paid for by the opposition. So I can imagine that, yeah, you may be desperate for the person not to get elected. But from the standpoint of the FBI, they shouldn't have a dog in the hunt. This smells. Let's keep going. Let's see. Did I cover anything else on this one? Alright, so right here. As a detailed answers provided damning rebuttal to the FBI's portrayal of Steele material, in fact, the FBI did have derogatory information on Steele, or explicitly told the FBI that Steele was desperate to defeat the man he was investigating and was biased. And the FBI knew the motive of the client and did not have to speculate or told FBI agents that the Democratic National nominee's campaign was connected to the research designed to harm Trump's election chances. Such omissions are by definition an abuse of the FISA system. Now, the reason they're an abuse of the FISA system, because the FISA system, believe it or not, cross your hand over your chest when you give your testimony. Because when you do that, you're always telling the truth. Essentially, it works on the loyalty system, that the agents that are coming for a warrant to completely invade and rip apart somebody's life, that they're being honest with the judge, apparently, or their consequences. Now, you can imagine these guys are uber honest because there's a 99.7% approval rating. They're not uber honest. It's just a 99.7% approval rating, meaning that it's like, why even have the court? Why even have the court? You can't call it a court with a 99.7 approval rating. I mean, ultimately, a court is where things are weighed and people argue and all this other stuff. This is, for all intents and purposes, just a fig leaf for the federal government to invade your life and rip your life apart. Essentially a politicized Stasi organization. Let's see. And he's referring to Comey. Don't take my word for it. FBI Comey acknowledged it himself when he testified last month that FISA Corp relies on an honor system in which the FBI is expected to divulge exculpatory evidence to the judge. I find that to be utterly absurd. I understand why they're doing this. They're doing this because the thought is, if a judge or if a lawyer or a criminal defense lawyer got their hands on information, there's some stuff that the government may need to, let's say, do that may be time sensitive or get their hands on, that if the defense attorney knew about, it would hamper the case. I mean, but you could kind of see the problem here, right? I mean, ultimately, you're completely giving the federal government massive powers to completely invade and rip apart people's lives. And with a 99.7% approval rating, I mean, come on, let's be honest. That's, at that point, it's just a political fig leaf. That's all I'm saying. We certainly consider it our obligation because our trust relationship with federal judges to present evidence that would paint a materially different picture of what we're presenting. Comey testified on December 7th, 2018. You want to present the judge reviewing an application a complete picture of the evidence, both its flaws and its strengths. Well, in this case, they didn't do that. They didn't do that. All right, I put this article at the bottom. Let's see. I don't necessarily have time to stay today, but let's. Actors in secret courts, honest. What a knee slapper. Yeah, I don't understand why they just accept them as being honest. I don't agree with my courts, but they are courts. I mean, I guess I'm saying, is it really a court when you don't have a defense attorney? Like, when you don't have a person opposing what the government wants. The FBI is coming with a decision. They say, we want to do X for a particular person. I would imagine that you would hope that the agents on any of the cases would be honest. And why in this case are the agents supposedly super honest, but in other cases you don't expect them to be honest? Like, I don't understand this, the logic behind this from the standpoint of the agents just being perfectly honest on this, and they're just revealing exculpatory information, all this other stuff. You're assuming that these agents are ever going to come back to this particular court for this particular case, and that evidence or information is going to come up to kind of blow up in their face. That may not happen. If they don't think that's going to happen, the whole honesty thing kind of goes away. I mean, why have defense attorneys at all? Why not just mandate that prosecutors be uber honest when they go about prosecuting their case, or that the police department just be uber honest when they're going about prosecuting or going after somebody? I mean, I understand, again, I get why they do it, but the secret court thing is, it's, you know, it goes against any notion of a democratic society. I mean, you have essentially, I'm not going to get into it, but just some of the stuff that takes place here are horrendous. Like getting information on people through secret means and then using the law enforcement to build a case on the individual in this kind of parallel construction. I mean, some of the stuff that they're doing with stuff like this is terrifying. So, all right, I'm going to end this here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you can always support the PayPal or Patreon. Thanks all.